let's move on to something else that is grabbing the headlines now. It's the Rio State Massacre. And I have to say, it sounds absolutely horrific, and I can't really get my mind around it, Sarah. So could you help break down what's actually happening, starting with what these headlines are referring
to? Footage while I'm talking, Ileana, do you think you can remove that one? Because I think this footage is so damning. This is the people of Rio de Janeiro while the massacre. There's a lot to talk here, Ileana. This Rio massacre is not an isolated incident of police violence. Far from it. And it's not an isolated domestic incident. It's a strategy. Castro, the governor of Rio, far right, close ally of Bolsonaro, ordered this as an act of his electoral campaign to say, look, I am going against trafficking. I have a strong hand. I use violence if I want to. I kill people if I want to. And there is a population that applauds this, unfortunately. So he wants to say that he's combating organized crime. But the irony is that he has ties to the organized crime, and we're going to get into that. And so it's when you have a lot of factions, one of them is in power, they use the state power to eliminate the rival factions while protecting their own criminal networks. This is what it is about. And Castro, CNN Brazil revealed that the Governor Castro handed over confidential public security reports directly to the U.S. consulate and negotiated with both the U.S. government and the DEA intelligence agency, requesting help to go against a specific drug cartel. So this is his strategy. He wants,
Sorry, can you repeat that? He requested who? He requested help from the U.S. military?
Castro himself, the governor of Rio, who ordered this massacre, before ordering the massacre, he handed over confidential public security reports from Rio de Janeiro state to the U.S. consulate. He negotiated with the DEA intelligence agency and tried to get hold of people in the White House to ask for a specific faction in the drug cartel to be recognized as narco-terrorists. And the Workers' Party, on the back of this, filed a case in the Supreme Court against Castro, the governor of Rio, for crimes of attacks against national sovereignty and for espionage. So there's many layers of that. So it's very interesting because right after the massacre, we had Trump offering help. Trump saying, "Oh, look, we're going to help you to put the military on the streets, to do a military-like raid." And what we see here is there is an alignment with the Brazilian far right, a convergence of interest with the MAGA strategy for Latin America. And not only there is a convergence, they are talking, they are asking help from each other. Do you know that we have Brazilian parliamentarians going to US and pleading for the classification of some drug cartels as narco-terrorists? That will be very convenient for them, because once they are narco-terrorists, the militias will come in, because that's not how you dismantle organized crime. Other actors will come in. It's not about removing an actor, because there are plenty of substitution. But in any case, Trump offered assistance for intervention. And what is the MAGA strategy for Latin America? Look, this is about Trump applying extrajudicial abilities to go in other countries. This has nothing to do with tackling drug trafficking.
I mean, also, just to clarify too, like it resulted in 135 deaths, right?
I will go into that. Yes, I will definitely go into that. What was this really about? It's a massacre. It's
because none of them
killings. Yes. So
none of them were faced trial. None of them were charged.
No, and they probably won't. So what is this about? This is about Trump applying the Alien Act and anti-terrorism legislation, which have extraterritorial reach, no due process, and exploit uninformed public commotion, because nobody wants drug dealing. Of course, we don't want them. That's how he intends to create a legal basis to attack Venezuela, by abusing the Aliens Act. So Trump is expanding his policy across the entire continent. And this year, the Trump administration signed an executive order creating a mechanism to classify drug cartels as so-called foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs, and especially designated global terrorists, SDGT. So these are legal definitions. And declaring a national emergency due to the threat of drug cartels. He's creating an exception from the law so he can intervene as he wishes. So under this process, State Department designated 8 cartels in Mexico, Salvador, and Venezuela as FTOs and SDGTs. So this executive order is central for the MAGA strategy of creating the enemy as a terrorist. So now Trump can invoke a law from 1798, the Alien Enemies Act, granting him, the president, extraordinary powers to evade Congress control and to become a war. And that's how he attacked Venezuela lately, using this order, executive order, and the Aliens Act. Now he's pushing Brazil to categorize those drug cartels as enemies, as terrorists, to put a target in Brazil that US can intervene. And this show is made to create momentum for a legislation in Brazil that will categorize these both drug cartels as narco-terrorism. Is to create the legal ground for US invasion. That's why you need a massacre, because you need to say, look what happened in the favelas of Rio. Look, we need help. We can't control this, because this is what Cláudio Castro went to say, the governor of Rio went to say in the press. We can't control them. The federal government didn't help us. Later, he had to admit it was a lie. So he wants to create a situation that Brazil is incapable of dealing with drug trafficking, a commotion, he being elected.
How did he do that? Like, he murdered essentially 135 people without due process. They're not being charged. We don't even know who they are. And they got killed by these supposed the police, the drug squads, whatever.
Let me explain the operational.
How did that? I mean, how does that translate into where it's out of control? Because he's the one who did the killing.
Yeah. So he's saying, the first thing he said, it was out of my jurisdiction. This was too much. Well, if it's your out of jurisdiction, you shouldn't go and do it. What he did, he gathered the police, and in one single day, friend of Bolsonaro, gathered 2,500 policemen. They flooded Serra da Misericórdia, favela as a slum, with overwhelming force. It's a military raid. 32 armored vehicles, 2 helicopters, 12 demolition vehicles. The operation lasted the entire day. They killed over 130 residents. We've seen the footage. He left, and the police left 60 bodies abandoned, over 60 bodies abandoned in a forest where they were killed for hours and over a day without investigation, without securing the scene, which they were removed by family members. Imagine you get the news, your son is dead, and then you go along all the residents to try to find, and you see almost 100 bodies, and you start pulling those bodies. There were footage in Brazilian press of they pulling the bodies and lining them up. And the governor Rio, the far-right governor, has the guts to call it a success operation, let me tell you something about this. You left 132 people dead. None. Not one single of the, at least until now, 132 people were named in the judicial search warrant or arrest warrant. We had 250 judicial warrants for search and arrest. None of these dead people were named in them. Can you call this a success? To call 132 people that weren't subject to the operation, including 4 police officers? Let me tell you what this is. This is extrajudicial killing of state force for a show to say Brazil is incapable to take care of their own drug dealers. Brazil is incapable of taking care. I'll show you another operation that the federal police did to against a success. I'll contrast this with a success operation. So what happens is the Brazil court classified the operation as a legal massacre. Yeah, completely ineffective at combating drug trafficking, and ordered an investigation. It's against Brazilian constitution, it's against decision of the Supreme Court, and for very good reason they ordered that. You know, they had no legal grounds for such an intervention, and they were operating against a decision of the Supreme Court on the use of force in Islam. It's a specific decision on how police can use force on Islam, because one of the problems in Brazil we have is the ethical cleansing of the population in the slums. Is the black, is the poor, generally the male, who will suffer those consequences, let alone the stray bullets. 4 people were attacked by stray bullets. You are in your home, you are brushing your teeth, there are stray bullets. If you see the footage of the houses after this savage massacre, I've seen such a thing in Lebanon, like when they left the remains of the civil war. It's the entire wall covered in bullet holes. So, and it's so, there is something else. The second thing that the Supreme Court said, there was an obstruction of justice by Governor Castro. The police claim that all cameras, which they have to use, from 2,500 body cameras, all had dead batteries simultaneously.
It's ridiculous.
Independent investigation of the Brazil Public Defender's Office. In Brazil, we have a prosecution office and a public defense office. They were blocked. They were physically blocked. And let me tell you something, Ileana, the Brazilian press is the second-grade accomplice in this. The press cover is phenomenal. They call the dead people as drug dealers. Where is the proof? They were not even named as suspect. Not only that, the police falsely claimed that a person on the internet, a man, an unrelated man that didn't even live in Rio, was a dead drug dealer. And then he came on social media, said, I am not drug dealer, I'm alive, and I don't live in Rio. He reclaimed his identity on social media, and they gave little or no voice to the family of the dead. They came on Instagram or social media or international press talking, the Brazilian media, hidden the stories of the people who were victimized by the far-right military raid. And of course, after you propagandize everyone, Folha de São Paulo, which is an accomplice in Brazilian dictatorship, ordered a survey. Let's see what Brazilian people think about this invasion. Are you in favor or are you against? After you create the whole ecosystem, 80%, according to this research, I don't know how accurate it is, 80% of Rio Islam's residents said to be in favor of this ethnical cleansing of the black and poor. Yeah. And that's why and Cláudio Castro reached his maximum approval rate and maximum rejection rate, both of them. So this is what they call Operation Containment, because they want to contain one specific faction, which is called the Red Comment. It's very interesting, isn't it, that you go to a place full of militias, full of factions, and you aim just at one. What's going to happen when you eliminate Red comment if you do, because you don't in those things. Well, the PCC will come over and the militias will come over. Do you know how the militias grew in Rio de Janeiro when they started doing raids against the drug trafficking without dismantling the economic structure? Because the militias took the territory. 40% of the Rio de Janeiro city territory belongs to militias, and that is Bolsonaro's heartland. Rio, yeah, that's where Bolsonaro comes from. Bolsonaro is son of the militias. The Brazil ultra-right run a test of authoritarian tactics before the next presidential elections. You know, it signals what is coming: state violence, extrajudicial killings, the consolidation of power through terror, while maintaining democratic facades. Well, I don't know, for some people maybe. So let me contrast. In August this year, there was an operation called Hidden Carbon against another cartel, the PCC. This is a actual São Paulo born cartel, but it's everywhere now. We had 0 deaths. It was a coordination between Federal Revenue Service, Federal Police, São Paulo Military Police, and another force called GACO. They blocked 7.6 billion reais in tax evasion, 3.2 billion in they blocked assets, and they identified a 40 billion in investment schemes with assets of 30 billion controlled by the organized crime. That's how you strangle the organized crime, by strangle their financial economy structure and dismantle their infrastructure. And you know where they were? They were at Faria Lima. Faria Lima is the Wall Street of South America. They already infiltrated on the financial system. They are not in the slums, Ileana. They are not with the poor people in the slums.
They're making so much money. Why would they be in the slums?
Yeah, they are not there. They were, yeah.
So I do have a question about this, because it's confusing to me to think about, because we know I don't know that much, but I know Lula is the president, and that's the left part of the political party. So what is their response to this?
So their response was to initiate investigations, to ask for investigations to be initiated. So Lula went to Rio, got a plane, went to Rio with a commission to investigate. You know, they have responded, this is a state massacre, this is unconstitutional, and you have done this outside your competency, and we are gonna look into that, and if we will make these people may be punished. It will be probably a long way until they are punished, and they have an electoral win. That's the problem. And I think what also comes about, it's very interesting, because Castro is a government that maintained a very low profile, but now his profile is coming up. And you know what? He himself is connected to the Red Commons. Oh, what a surprise. Yeah, it's a direct connection. So Governor Cláudio, far right, and ally of Bolsonaro, is connected to a state representative called T.H. Joyas. He is a former deputy of the state of Rio de Janeiro, and he was arrested in September for being the major weapons suppliers to the Red Commons, who Cláudio Castro claims to dismantle. Look, if you go on social media, you see an array of pictures, friendly pictures with T.H. Joyas and Castro, okay? The governor, of course, denied having close connections with T.H. Joyas, his name. But T.H. Joyas was a state deputy who used his position. The claims are he used his position to facilitate arms trafficking, and he was the red color representative of the Red Command in the Rio Assembly, and he was acting as a political link for the faction in the northern areas of the city. Yeah, and according to investigations, he laundered money. He lived in a luxury condominium, Rio, of course. He had several luxury cars, used anti-tank equipment to hide to hinder police operations in territories controlled by the Red Command. Yeah. And he maintained relationships with the Red Command leaders in communities. Em Complexo do Alemão, Maré, Cidade de Deus. Complexo do Alemão is where the raid happened. Look at that. So it's very interesting because right after T.H. Joyas was arrested, Castro declared that no, there was no infiltration of organized crime into politics in Rio de Janeiro. I fully deny that. How can you deny in front of so many facts? Reality beats it all. You know, the facts are speaking. But you see an array of pictures of him arrested with weapons, with weapons trafficking, circulate a lot of Israeli trafficking. And you see a lot of pictures of Castro with T.H. Joyas throughout the years. They go to watch football games together. Flamengo is their team of the heart, you know. And you know who else is a friend of T.H. Joyas? Guess.
Bolsonaro.
Senator Flávio Bolsonaro, son of Jair Bolsonaro. He's seen the footage hugging, kissing in Rio de Janeiro with T.H. Joyas. Do you think that the ultra-right in Brazil grow from the organized crime? That's what we need to see. And this is the MAGA strategy, you know. Let me tell you what Flávio Bolsonaro did. It's very interesting. He gave national security dossiers to Trump, Marco Rubio, and attempting to convince the US to classify these factions in Rio and told Trump to invade the government to find attacks against narco-traffickers. So, he was asking for military intervention when Trump attacked Venezuela. He said, I'm jealous. I wish Trump would attack Brazil in the same fashion. But let me show a picture. Let me show a video to the audience of what Cláudio Castro was doing. Let me just find this video. What Cláudio Castro, after that many people.
He massacred 132 people.
Yeah, let's see what he's done after he massacred the people. This is Governor Cláudio.
This is at a church, right?
He's in the church. Look at that, with his family. Right after, he's saying, baby Jesus, help him. What's possible?
It's just so horrific. Okay, so, you know, I just want to say one last thing before we...
Well, I have another video I really would like to share with you and the audience.
Okay, sorry.
Also, right after the massacre, this is how Cláudio Castro was, what we have here, how he was received in the...
Yeah, so I mean, as you can see, he's like still very popular amongst at least this constituency, this church-going constituency. It's really horrific. And I have to say one thing before we actually invite Carlos on stage, because he's actually here in the studio with us, and I'm very excited to shift over to that news. But one thing, like, I think one of my big takeaways from what you're saying is that this is how US puppets work. You see, like, the actual right-wing faction in Brazil is also benefiting from the association with the US. And so they're inviting the US imperialist agenda into the country because they personally have a self-interest.
Okay. The guy in blue is Bolsonaro's son, and this is the drug dealer. This is Bolsonaro's son here with T.H. Jules. But carry on, yeah.
I mean, they're so blatant about it, but they think that the population of the Brazil and the overall, you know, they have the cover of the U.S. empire, so they think they're protected internationally, and then they feel like they have the capture of the Brazilian population, that they will believe anything they say, essentially. It's quite horrific, but this is actually the extent of the corruption of U.S. puppets around the world. And this is not an isolated case. It's just extremely horrific that we're seeing, the events that we're seeing unfolding, but it's certainly not isolated. And it's also, it's part of the way that things work. It's not unusual to have this sort of like back and forth.
Now, this is THI being arrested and the government of Rio de Janeiro with him. Just to make sure everything we're saying here is, look at that. Yeah, they were good friends. TH joyous. That's what we're talking about. And as you brilliantly said, they feel they have the back from their associations with US far right. That's the extent of the empire. I think it's a brilliant analysis.